We have a great topic here today. It's a to fee or not to fee. Is feeless the future of the industry? If you would ask me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where we would be with blockchain adoption, crypto adoption, I would have said within 10 years, everyone's using blockchain. There will be mass adoption, more banks are dying, and we are going to win. And I always imagined that a key feature for creating mass adoption would be something related to fees. How can we allow people to do crypto transactions, blockchain transactions against very low fees? So for me, this is very personal. I want this to really happen in the future, that we can allow people to do transactions either feelessly or with very low transaction fees. So what I would like to start with is giving all of you a very short moment to introduce yourselves. Tell us who you are and for which company you work. Starting with you.
Okay, hi. My name's Andrew Clifford. I'm the president of Bitcoin Unlimited and been supporting the organization developing blockchain software for the Satoshi UTXO model for the last 10 years. That's the design that Satoshi originally came up for Bitcoin. He was quite a genius, and the original design is still quite sound, even though a lot of coins have moved on to the account-based model. So my perspective is the UTXO-based model for fees, which is what I want to explain here today.
Yep, thank you very much.
I am Andrea Suisani. I am a colleague of Andrew. I share his position on that. I would only add that I am a Nexa core developer. I'm developing Nexa, which is the full node for Nexa, which is a blockchain, UTXO based, and probably you already heard about it, so I wouldn't, go further.
Yeah, so I'm Dom. I'm from Heiko. I'm a CEO and founder of that. We're new and up and coming blockchain. We are building a Solana, but like on EVM. So we are trying to do a blockchain that has like very, very low fees, but it still has fees. So I'm pro fees. And yeah, in previous life, I've been a software engineer mostly. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Crimson Clad, and I work in operations for a blockchain called Hive. And so I'm on the fence because I enjoy fees in some models. I think they're very functional, but I also work in a blockchain ecosystem that was specifically developed to be feeless and to be really seamless and create great social experiences, which I think fees can get in the way of. So I'm interested in having a bit of a chat about this today.
So my first question is for you, Crimson, is what do we mean when we use the word feelers in the context of Web3?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one because nothing is free. It doesn't matter what you are building. You must build something sustainable. And in the Web3 space and with blockchain, one of the biggest hurdles is having too many transactions or people spamming transactions or, frankly, building a viable business. Fees are often part of the monetization structure of what you're doing. So for something to be feeless, it means that you have to have some consideration given to how the ecosystem can handle participants. In Hive's case, there are still fees. If you want to think of, you are spending something to be able to transact. But in our sort of estimation and for what we're building, the idea is that if people are using bursts of digital cash, if they're playing blockchain games together, if they are working on something that relates to our social graph, which is a lot of content creation and content consumption, fees are an active blocker to a great user experience, but they're also, they don't allow for democratization of basically being able to make money. So in that case, we have a model that is essentially when you stake your Hive, the blockchain is then allocates resource credits to you. And so in the background, it's a constant dynamic load balancing based on the type of transaction you're making versus the amount of Hive you have staked. So you're never consuming your resources, But your ability to really try and stress the network with what you want to do, you will have to put some skin in the game to do it. And eventually, if you would like to become liquid again and you'd like to remove your funds, you can. They haven't been consumed out from underneath you, but it does mean that you may have to change the way that you use the network. If you really want to be able to use tons and tons of transactions, then you're going to have to stake some Hive. And that actually opens up a business model. And it's one of the value propositions of Hive is that businesses that want to allocate resource credits to their users have to hold Hive, and then they can delegate in the background. And so those users never know fees, they never see fees, but there is something in the background that is taking the place of those fees. It's just done in a way that really puts the emphasis on making things accessible to their customers, to their clients, to the end user, and to the whole process.
Oh, thank you for the elaborate answer. I would like to ask the same question to you, Andrew. You already mentioned the Bitcoin UTXO model. So if we talk about feeless, what do we mean by it, according to you?
Yes, feeless, I think, is just not having a fee at all. And in Bitcoin, in the original model, and which still exists, it will accept transactions without any fee. And there was a basis called days destroyed, where someone has coins that are sat for a year or two, and there'd be a kind of credit in the mempool given to transactions which support the spending of old coins. And the idea was to bring coins into circulation and to create more holders instead of the coins sitting in the hands of large holders. So the feeless situation for Bitcoin was there. But with the block size remaining at 1 megabyte and filling up, those free transactions disappeared and the fees started climbing. And one of the main founding driver for Bitcoin Unlimited, our organization in 2015, was to try and keep fees low in Bitcoin. So our philosophy is low fees, but not zero fees.
And how would Bitcoin Unlimited like to lower the fees? Is it
Well, the way the fees are set normally is a fee pressure between users wanting to use the blockchain and miners. Miners want high fees. They want fees on top of the block reward. And what's happening with Bitcoin, with the halvings now down to 3.125, the miners are getting less and less money from the block reward for Bitcoin. And Satoshi originally envisaged the blockchain having many more transactions and there'd be many more fees for the blockchain miners. And he originally had a 30 megabyte limit in Bitcoin, which would have allowed many transactions for fees, and that would have created a sustainable model long term. So we're going to get another halving in Bitcoin in less than 3 years' time, I believe, where we'll go down to 1.6 odd. So that will really tighten the miners' profits, and they're not going to get the extra fees that they would need to make the network sustainable. This is my concern about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Unlimited has the scalable block model, so the fees can remain low, but as more transactions come in, it will give the miners more reward.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Andrea, I would like to ask you the same question as well, but it's according to you a feeless model.
Sure. I think that in general, maybe in the Hive case or Bitcoin case, someone has to pay for the network. The network has to be sustainable, be it through staking or through actual paying the fees right away. There's no other way around it, because people the work that people put in the system have to be rewarded. Otherwise, there would be a lot of freelance around, but I don't see much these days, even in the past. So in the UTXO based model, or I'm pro very low fee, because fee are necessary as a spam prevention mechanism, prioritization of transaction, a lot of stuff. But especially if you want to be a cash system, you need to have very low fee. And the only way to do that in a UTXO based model, or even in other kind of model, is to have a lot of adoption. very low fee with very huge amount of transaction in such a way that even if the block reward in case of Bitcoin goes to zero, you will be able to get tons of BTC or value in general, either way, by the volume. If Bitcoin would have managed to reach the status of cash for all the world, even just by 2 transactions per day per person, we would have like 1,000 of Bitcoin in fees per block. So we would, be okay, even if the transaction would be very, very low, even lower than 1 Satoshi per byte.
Okay, thank you. To you, the same question, Thomas. What is in your view? What does feelers mean, and why is it important?
Yeah. So I guess I agree with the other panelists that, in the end, someone has to pay for, the value that the network provides to the users. And I was thinking about this the other day and realized that, blockchains in the end are just like infrastructure, mostly for moving assets and ownerships and keeping track of that. And then when you think about it, it's a bit different from Web2 like infrastructure, because in Web2 like infrastructure, for the products themselves and the product owners pay for the infrastructure. So the end user, like you using the Facebook, you're not really paying for each request that you do to that server. And the blockchains are a bit different, that in the end user has to pay to use that infrastructure. And that's, I think, is a bit of an issue. And that's what I think initially led to this thinking of how we can do it in a feeless manner. And I think in the end, we're still going to have the fees. It's just, either going to be some other entity paying for the fee. We either going to have like some other sort of structure, how to do it, maybe with staking, or maybe in EVM land, there's more and more talks about the account abstraction and maybe how you can sort of allow some paymasters, so some third party. So in the end, maybe that product that is building on chain to pay for your fees. And I think in the end, user might feel that the transaction is feeless, but in the end, there's always an entity that does pay for the value that the network provides.
Okay, I see. Crimson, you mentioned that Hive does not, when you do a transaction, when you vote, there's not really a fee involved with the Hive token itself, right? How can the protocol generate enough revenue for the miners? Can you explain that?
Right. So Hive is an inflationary token. And what ends up happening is part of our distribution each day goes to block producers. So it's a little bit different than a fee-based model where as long as you have transactions that are contributing fees, then that's the determining factor of how much is paid out to a block producer. For us, we actually have sort of a set amount available per day, and block producers that participate in a round are rewarded at for each block that they produce. It's not necessarily a variable reward depending on what's inside the block. So in that case, there is a set sort of amount that will always exist, that always is there to reward those producers. So as you guys were discussing, and especially as you mentioned, the more transactions there are means there is more Hive that needs to be staked, which means more people will have to hold Hive. And there are other benefits to it. You can earn APR or whatever. But at the end of the day, what it means is the model is actually driving more people to both buy Hive, stake it, hold on to it. It's building a healthier bottom line for the entire market. But it also means that there's a little less uncertainty in block production. And because we are a DPoS model, it does mean also that anybody can participate in block production, and it's not as inexpensive barrier to entry. But that being said, some of our inflation goes to other aspects of the ecosystem as well. So there's tokens that are being distributed in a number of ways. But there is a set schedule for block production that is actually prioritizing rewards must go to people that secure the network. And so the way that sort of the feelessness comes in then, of course, is that anybody using the network day to day simply isn't eroding the assets that they're holding. The idea is with crypto, hopefully, you're not spending the same assets as you're using them and going to zero faster. The idea is to build circular economies and to build, healthy economies as well.
Yeah. What I find also interesting from you, Andrew and Andrea, you mentioned the word if Bitcoin would like to become like digital cash system, right? Well, if you look into the Bitcoin space, there's a huge community who is talking about Bitcoin as if it should be digital gold. What is your view about that? Because if it's digital gold, there would not be enough transactions. And how would miners react to respond to that?
I think that is a set realization, but the digital gold thing could not coexist with the aim to have a fixed amount of Bitcoin. There's no other way around it. Once the block reward goes to zero,
Yep.
who is going to pay for securing the network? No one, because there's not enough transaction unless Bitcoin goes to trillion, and even with a few transactions per block, the miner would get enough money to actually sustain the network. But this is not the case. In my opinion, this digital gold store of value thing is like having a chair with 3 legs rather than 4. Yes. The medium of exchange, the cash part of the discourse has to be there. Otherwise, there's no usefulness. Sooner or later, people will realize that, but I could be wrong. I hope to be wrong, but I don't think so.
No. Would you like to elaborate on it, Andrew?
Yes, I agree as well. I don't think the digital gold model by itself is sustainable, and that the modern world economy demands many transactions. And the average person today probably transacts 6 times, 10 times a day. And so that's a really important part of the world economy. And so just putting money aside, I think that the store of value, when we think about gold, gold was used for money up to 150 years ago. It was the main medium of exchange everywhere. And the reason why that worked was that transactions were done face to face. So gold and silver could be passed with the goods. But what happened with the invention of the telegraph was that commerce became long distance. And then eventually that demanded fiat money with foreign exchange, where so much commerce is done long distance that it was just impossible to use gold to do transactions. So the kind of thinking of a store of value, gold became a store of value, it still is a store of value, but the Bitcoin emulating that is like the stool with one leg. I mean, it really is a flawed and incomplete model.
Thomas, can I ask you about your opinion on this? So, Andrew and Andrea are saying that gold as Bitcoin as a digital gold store of value is a failed model. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have like a strong opinion on that because I think the arguments make sense. We like narratives in crypto, and everything is driven by narratives. Yep. So I think the only chance this can work, if we reach like a certain market cap, and Bitcoin goes to a certain price, then this could work. Otherwise, just the math does not sort of play out, and you cannot sort of argue with math, can't you? Can you?
Yeah, that's a good point. So when people think about feelessness, what they, and me as well, especially when I just started in the crypto space, is how can you prevent spam? How can you keep the network secure? Would you like to elaborate on that, Thomas?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's why networks sort of need fees. I think in the end, no matter where the fees come from, from the end, like retail users that are doing the transaction, from the products that are building on-chain and using blockchain as an infrastructure, from some other mechanism, we're gonna need the fees. Otherwise, it's like free for all, and like basically anyone can submit any amounts of data. And we've seen this previously. We even seen this with Ethereum, where there were some loopholes where people could submit like just blobs of data that would like sort of be pretty cheap on Ethereum, but also that would clog up the network and make the other sort of more relevant transactions that are doing some actual like real thing become way pricier. So I guess it's not only preventing spam is not only a binary question to have or not have fees. It's also about figuring out like how to make that fee mechanism work properly in case of various edge cases. You know, there was a lot of, I guess, like initially people were talking how Solana did not figure this out properly because their fee mechanism is actually based on it's a bit different compared to EVM. They don't like compute the like how much compute the transaction is doing, and their fee is not based on that. And basically, everyone was sort of a bit skeptic that, you know, said Solana can have a lot of problems with it. But in the end, it turned out that it works. So, you know, like, but of course, Solana's approach is to test and prod. So, you know, it's a bit different. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's not about fees or no fees. I think fees are mandatory to prevent spam. But the next question is, how do you make those fees sort of work properly? Because yeah, you can be Ethereum and still sort of fail on some edge cases. But also you can be Ethereum and be super unuseful because your fees are just so high. And you can be Solana where the fees are very, very cheap. I don't even think about fees when I use that network, you know. But they sort of don't have like spam problems most of the time.
Okay, so Domen just said that we should have fees, but how can we manage it in such a way that it's still that the blockchain itself is still usable? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that Bitcoin Unlimited wanted to increase the block size. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you please elaborate on that? How the block size would improve the whole situation? Maybe not everyone knows about what Bitcoin Unlimited wants to achieve.
This is a very long discussion, but to make a long story short, the number of transactions that you include in a block determine how many people could use the network. In Bitcoin, there is a block every 10 minutes, and at the current size, transaction can provide 7 transactions per second, which means that every given second, only 7 people could make a transaction. That's it. 7 transactions per second are almost nothing, even if you decide to limit yourself to be electronic cash, peer-to-peer cash system for the world, not bothering with anything else. Just let's suppose for the 1 billion people that live in Europe, US, Australia, UK, you need to have at least hundreds of thousands of transactions. Visa, MasterCard have 20,000 transactions per second. So to do that, the block size is the crucial point, which is you have to cram into the block tons more of transaction. That's the way it is, unless you move to other kind of technology like Solana or whatever. So we pushed back then for an increase of the block size, temporary, so that the demand would have met with the offer because until 2015 the block weren't full, like almost full but not. From 2015 onwards, the block were always full, and there were a war to get into the block, and the fees start to go sky high values, and you never know if your fee is enough in advance. Yes. So they put in a lot of mechanism to bump the fees. It was like almost impossible to use the network at times. So we wanted to make it so that those things would not happen, so that everybody could have used Bitcoin to do the thing that they wanted to do, buy things, transfer value. But unfortunately, it's not what happened. And then we are here now with a ton more of products, which is direct consequences of that war that we lost and how they won.
Andrew, would you like to elaborate on this?
Yes, I think with the trying to increase the block size was an interesting test of consensus. At one point, Bitcoin Unlimited, the miners using our software had over 52% of the hash rate. We nearly achieved getting larger blocks into Bitcoin, and it would have been very different. And I remember back to 2013 and 2014, we had people who were Bitcoin evangelists going into streets in Arnhem and Berlin and going to the merchants and saying, will you accept Bitcoin? Will you accept Bitcoin? And they were. And there were streets where all the shops were accepting Bitcoin for retail, and that was before the blocks got full. So you could buy a coffee or buy a t-shirt or something with Bitcoin, and the fee would be 2 cents. And people don't mind paying 2 cents for a transaction.
Yeah.
And with our fiat transactions, we're paying, even though it's not obvious to us, we're paying in the cost of printed money, we're paying in the cost of bank accounts. So we don't get free transactions, and with the fiat at the moment anyway. But Bitcoin was being used for retail purposes, and that got choked off. As soon as the fees went to 50 cents, $1, the retailers, no one was paying. No one would buy a small item for that. You might still buy the Ferrari, but you wouldn't buy any small items. So it killed the retail market.
Yeah.
So at that point, the store of value mantra became the main method of the reasons why people should keep Bitcoin.
I remember that up until early 2017, when I wanted to show off how Bitcoin works, I told them, please download this Ethereum wallet or another wallet.
Yes.
I will give you 5 USD in Bitcoin. I will give you 5 USD. Totally fine. Up until early 2017. And by the end of 2017, if I wanted to do that, I had to pay a transaction fee of around $10, I think. Back then, it was $10.
At times, it goes also a lot higher than that.
So for me, it was not worth it anymore to give someone just $5. So I think that what we are discussing right now is also mass adoption. I always believe that low transaction fees allow you to show off how the blockchain works, how fast the settlement is, and by showing it to people how it works, it's easier for them to adopt it as well. I know that Hive also has its own token, which is not the Hive token, but the dollar. And back in 2017, 18, I always thought that this is so cool that you can send a stablecoin to each other with no fees. I always consider it as no fees. Can you tell us what you think about feelessness or very low fees and mass adoption, and how Hive tries to solve it?
So a lot of that kind of comes back to what I touched on earlier, which is that if you're not going to be paying fees right up front in actual cryptocurrency, then you are either paying in time or you're paying in investment. But it's done in such a way that it takes some of the pressure off from having to have the asset. And like you say, like spend double what you expect to, because there's a fee that just kind of, plops in on top that you weren't ready for. So yes, we have something called HBD, which is the Hive-backed dollar. It is a stable coin. It's a no KYC permissionless stable coin within our ecosystem. And it moves around the same way that Hive does. So settlement is in 3 seconds or less, head block if you're streaming and you're watching for these transactions less than a second, and completely feeless. But it's the same idea. You are still drawing on the resource credit system. So the idea that if you have some resource credits, then you're able to transact. But for us, just as you mentioned, this is the best part of adoption. And we actually have a dApp inside our ecosystem called V for V, a value for value. And it is using our rails to actually settle Bitcoin Lightning transactions. So you can open a channel and you can start moving funds around in Hive or HBD, and then you can settle, when you're ready, you can settle via your Lightning rails. And it means that you can actually accept a Lightning invoice or send a Lightning invoice via the Hive network and have it settle instantly and feelessly. And then when you off-ramp via Bitcoin, then you're going to be subject to your KYC or whatever sort of institutional requirements there are. But that has been amazing because it is sort of what Lightning was supposed to be, where I can whip out my phone and I can send you a transaction, and instead of us doing the awkward dance and like being like, it's coming, like, it just settles. And that has been really great for adoption here, even in Amsterdam, but around the world, we have small economies that are popping up where people are doing that, pounding the street marketing, going, hey, would you accept these types of cryptocurrency? Let's tell you why. Here are some of the benefits, but then also incentivizing them to bring their customers back and saying, hey, if you pay in these coins, we will reward you with crypto. We're going to get you into communities. We're going to have you posting reviews on the blockchain, and we'll be able to reward those as well. And so all of a sudden, you've got native brand ambassadors who are engaged with your product, who are earning from you, who are spending with you. And again, it's that idea of circular economies where people can participate with very low barriers to entry, but are generating more transactions and then are starting to bring more people in. So that's a really important part of it, is that perceived feelessness and that speed and that ease of use. Because as the network grows, then of course those costs that are being paid in the background also grow, like, naturally.
Yeah. Okay. Thomas, would you like to share a personal your opinion or experience as well about fees and how it either disrupts, interrupts adoption?
Yeah, sure. Fees and especially high fees was one of the reasons we, together with like my other co-founders, started the chain itself. I've come from EVM background. I've been working on smart contracts, developing them, auditing them. Started from Ethereum. At some point was Ethereum Maxi. Layer decided that maybe that's not the best sort of way to go forward with my life. We looked at Ethereum, looked at Solana, looked at other chains, and we sort of realized that, okay, Ethereum itself doesn't scale. It has these issues with the transactions per second, high fees. I remember at a certain point in I think DeFi craze, so that's maybe 2020, I paid around like $100 to do a transaction on Ethereum. That was like a swap of tokens. And yeah, after that, of course, we started having these layer 2s. But if you look at layer 2s, you realize that even them don't really scale, because most of them are just the copy paste of the Ethereum code base with some like maybe ZK proofs or maybe some like fault proofs. And what happens is that basically is the same code base, and it is cheaper because it's running on a single like machine. It's not that decentralized. But it is cheaper only until a certain point. Whenever blocks become full on an L2, the prices like still go up, So we saw some like crazy NFT mints and we saw some crazy airdrops, and prices on layer 2s also went to around like being $20 per transaction just to claim your tokens for some, I don't know, meme or whatever. And we realized, that that's still a problem. Somehow, in Solana world, even though like I'm not a Solana maxi, but we are taking a lot of learnings from Solana. We looked at that, and it's also sort of looked like they managed to solve that. And we thought that, okay, maybe we can bring that over to EVM. And we realized that, yeah, it's actually possible. You just need to do things like differently and design a bunch of things from scratch. And one of the things was that, yeah, you just need to have like bigger blocks in the end. Because, whenever the blocks are small, there's like more demand than the supply, and the economics kicks in, and there's not much you can do. That's the like a very simple economic rule. If like demand is higher than supply, the price is going to go up. And I think that in the end this conversation leads not to only about fees, but also about blocks, about transactions per second, and all the other metrics that make the blockchain scalable. So yeah, I guess that's like a rant maybe, but but in the end, it's not only about fees.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to involve the public. There are quite a few people in this room. Do you guys have questions for the panelists? Anyone who would like to ask questions? Don't be shy. Yes, Ruben?
Yeah, wasn't the whole Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin fork about block size?
Yes, it was.
I think that
This as well?
yeah.
We have a long story. So we started Bitcoin Unlimited to try to drive the development of Bitcoin toward higher scalability. We fought that battle. It didn't work out. We started BCH, Bitcoin Cash, and we stay in Bitcoin Cash for 5 years, quite a long time. And I don't anything against them. As long as someone, in my opinion, as long as some project provide an electronic peer-to-peer cash for the world, I'm okay with that. As long as someone is able to do it. So I hope that Nexa will be able to do it. But if anybody else, I'm okay with that. And we moved to Nexa because we had some idea, some concept that we want to develop quickly, and we thought that it was worthy. to, part the ways and create this new project.
Maybe very nice to mention here is that a few months ago, I went to Mallorca to visit Roger Ver, a very good friend of mine. He wrote an amazing book, I think, called Hijacking Bitcoin.
Yes, I've got that.
So if you're interested in this topic on how the whole block size war happened and so on, you also mentioned many.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very good book.
Read the book. Read the
Yeah.
book.
I heard about it. I still need to read it.
Okay. Any other questions, guys?
Don't you think there's like a possibility that there would be like a feeless part and a feeling part, let's say?
Someone has to pay for the service. That's it. I mean,
Because if I think to applying it to social media or something like that, if you would have a blockchain protocol, I don't see people paying for posting on Facebook.
Yeah. Long term, I think in the end, the fees are going to be paid by other entities, not the end users.
So, I mean, that's, yeah, well, so that's exactly what Hive is, if we're being honest. It's built to be the connective tissue of Web3, and it's specifically meant to hold transaction value at base layer, but also social data, because that is incredibly valuable. But for a lot of chains, depending on what they're trying to do, whether they're high level economic financial tools, or whether, they're meant to be digital cash, the idea of keeping a like or a post or a comment at base layer, that's spam. We don't want it. Well, so Hive was built specifically with those transactions in mind, because these days that is a very crucial part of how people interact with products, services, each other. It's where they choose to send their crypto. Like, most people don't get into a cryptocurrency project just because they heard about it, someone invited them into it, they played a game, and then they got a magic internet money. And you know what I mean? It's part of how we create marketplaces. So Hive specifically treats those transactions the same as a financial transaction. But that means that, it has to be feeless. There is nobody on earth that's going to like a post and be like, shit, I just had to pay. Oh, look. Like, it's just not going to happen. And that's where our model came from, with the understanding that there is a cost, but what are ways that we can express that cost or defray that cost? And in our case, it's the idea that, okay, well, to make sure to help sort of bolster the network and bring the value of the token up, you're going to have to hold some of it. And if you don't want to, you can still use it, because we still need you to participate. So what else do you have that you can pay in? And in that case, it would be time. There's a load balancing effect on the network. And that's where these resource credits come in. They look at the type of transaction that you're doing. They are dynamic buckets. So different types of transactions are handled differently. And it's both how many of them are happening and also what's going on in each block. And all of this is happening in the background. And what it means is that for people who are there for just social, for just gaming, for the things that need frictionless, feeless transactions, the blockchain functions that way. But again, for the businesses that are creating social media or are creating businesses, they do. They have to find a way to pay the fees. And in most cases, the easiest way is to buy Hive and stake it, because they are making that paid transaction, but they're also not, they're not the ones who are necessarily paying directly to a block producer, which means they're not eroding that investment that they've made.
Okay. I think we are really coming at the end of the panel, panel discussion. I would like to give all of you guys the chance to summarize or speak out the most important thing for you, for the audience to take away in 1 minute. Starting with you, Andrew.
Right. Okay. I think because the mention of social media and Facebook's been mentioned a couple of times already. So these are centralized services. So there's this old saying about, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. And that's that with Facebook, is that you're not paying to put up a post or to like something, but that's because you're getting targeted advertising at you. You're losing or you're leaking all your private information, so it can be sold to third parties, etc. So these centralized services can be free because they're extracting value from you as someone out on the internet. But with the blockchain, without a centralized control, there's no one who's centrally extracting value. So then it's a part of the responsibility of all blockchain users to contribute to the sustainability. And you used the word sustainability, Crimson, in your first answer, is that blockchains have to be sustainable because there isn't that centralized control over them.
Thank you. Andrea?
I will be quick. Fees are necessary. The lower, the better. And to be on the better side of this equation, adoption is key. So it has to be through scalable blockchain that we collect enough fee, even though the fee per transaction is low, that blockchain would be sustainable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll just add to Andrea. I think, fees are mandatory. We cannot avoid them. We just need to figure out a way how to. Blockchains are already, about reducing frictions, but they reduce frictions in some manner. But then on the other side, they introduce other frictions. If we can remove those other frictions like fees, for the end user by we are doing it in an account abstraction way. If you can do that, then you remove lots of more frictions than just that initial chunk, and that sort of drives the adoption, and I think that's all what we want. So I think long term we should go fee-less, but in the end someone's gonna pay the fees.
I think my takeaway is, honestly, I think of fees in the same way that I think of crypto in general. When people say, oh, what's your favorite coin? I don't immediately say I'm a Hive maximalist, although in some ways I am. I'm a crypto maximalist. I believe very strongly that this space is going to build toolkits for people, and you're going to choose different tools from different blockchains to build the life that you want. And I think in some cases, fees in the standardized way that we know them are going to be a part of that toolkit. And in some ways, they're going to be abstracted away, or they're going to be represented in a different format. But it's the choice that you now have. And that's the exciting part, because you didn't before. You didn't have any choice with any single thing. And now you get to say, I'm going to use this financial service. I'm going to use this product. I'm going to integrate with this chain and be with these people. And you can choose how to do that and what you're willing to pay for it. And that's the whole point of why we're here.
Well, I would like to thank the amazing panelists here. Please give them a warm applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.